It's 10:05. So can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We didn't discuss any. We didn't take a vote on it. Okay, brings us to financials.
On page 10, nothing extremely interesting here. I just want to draw your attention to at this stage of the year, we're in good shape in terms of our income under our plan, but most of that plan or that budget was based upon receiving the fees from the custodian, which we haven't received yet, and we will at some point anticipate it closing to be this year. On the expense side, administrative staff fees, as you see, are at 53% of the budget at this point, which is where you would expect them to be. That's the largest expense item. This was as of the end of June, so you would expect to be somewhere around 50% of your expenses, so we're good there. And everything else is under budget. You may have a question about the pass-through, $12,000 pass-through, both in the income statement and also in the expense statement. That represents fees that Rose collects from applicants in anticipation of something being done. So she's paying, for example, Loki Brill potentially before she's receiving the fees from the applicant, or the other way around. We receive the fees from the applicant and we pay to Loki Brill. So it passes through on both sides of the income statement. That's really it. On the financial position, we have $746,000 and somewhat change in the bank. Rose, you have to help me out on the, I have a question about FDIC insurance with the Bank of Greene County.
We don't need it because they have collateral.
I was just going to say, they have collateral, we have evidence of that.
Yeah, and we moved a large chunk of the money back, if you remember, to the Bank of Greene County because their interest rate was marginally, but still higher than what M&T had. So we're leaving it sitting there for the higher interest rate.
And just as an aside, if you go back to page 10, our interest income is down from what we had. I thought it was the best rates have dropped even lower than we hoped. So cash in the bank, $746,551.
That's the county, right?
Yes.
So we're in good shape.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate the time. I need a motion to accept the financials as presented.
I'll make that motion too.
Thank you, Faye. I have a second with Mike Ham. Anyone on the question? Just one quick question. In regards to what we have liquid in the bank this year versus last year, are we, because I know we talk about not really leaving a significant amount.
Well, what's liquid is all the cash accounts, so we actually have a lot more in cash.
I think that you can look into
So
that.
we don't have a lot
No,
of
we did look into it. There are no better interest rates. That's why we put it in the checking.
Okay.
The Bank of Greene County, because that was higher than even CDs.
So they answer the question about
It's
cash on
so
hand.
bad.
We have more cash on hand now than we did last time. The rates were higher when we had more.
But there's a
CDs.
reason, because there's no real gain by doing anything else with it.
No, we
All right, thank you. So there was a motion, a second. Anyone else on the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll accept those. Thank you, sir. Chair's report. It's very busy, juggling a lot of balls. A lot of things that are coming out. Yeah, a lot of potential, a lot of ongoing issues, a lot of clarification. But certainly not unhappy as the chair as to the direction this board is moving. Very thorough, and I probably don't say that enough, but at times you get too much credit and you get too much blame, and I want to thank the board for all the hard work and effort that they put in. So that is my report. The CEO's report.
So we are working on a pre-screen for a potential project. And as you may recall from last month, our insurance bill was significantly higher this year, approximately 25%. Which was a few $100s. We sent it back to the broker before paying it to find out what had happened and to see if it should be shopped around. The broker informed us that there's an industry-wide increase to liability rates, and they were unable to get a better rate for us due to state regulations on the policy, so they couldn't transfer it to a different carrier because of the way the regulations were. Not that we can't switch carriers, but there were specific needs we needed. And I believe one of the issues is like that the governor has allowed lawsuits for like somebody, if they came to sue us about something that happened 25 years ago, our liability insurance from right now would be on the hook for covering it. So that's caused an industry-wide increase in liability. We sent out the project post-closing affidavits to several of our projects again, and we had a June 30th deadline. Everybody did finally get us their information back, and what that is basically a true up, so that if somebody came to us with a $100,000 project and they ended up spending more, then we would get the 1% of the extra that they spent, as well as just looking over all of the work that they've done. One project so far had sent back the fee because they did end up spending a bit more, which was Henry Stout, the Full Moon Resort, Creative Environments, whichever name you want to call it. He did ask that I ask the board to not charge the fee for his 1%, which ended up being around $5,000 because of the pandemic, etc. Although I was sympathetic to what they've gone through as a company, I told them I didn't think that would be possible because we can't do that for everybody, right? It's the original 1% of the total project cost.
Also, they're totally booked for the next 2 years.
Yes.
Thank you, Faye.
So I'm just
Well,
relaying the
I
message.
should say it, but I know a lot of people, that's a fabulous place.
You know what I used to say?
Beautiful.
You know what I used to say to contractors? I don't share in your profit. I'm not going to wallow in your losses. So
Yeah.
it's a cost of doing business, I guess.
Right, I mean, we're certainly sympathetic that they had a bad year, but
A lot of people did.
we just can't do it, we're still trying to get together for another board training day. At this point, it's gonna be September, October, but I need to hear back from all of you about what your schedules look like, because it would be a full day again. So after this meeting, I'll send out another email and we'll try to really firm up some
Well,
dates.
get them right now. Get them
That's
down
the
now.
fall, when he's done golfing, probably. make it a
I'll
lot
be in
easier.
Ireland the first week of October, so you can hold it.
That's something.
It's the first week of October.
The Economic Development, Tourism, Planning, and Transit Committee has invited us to do our quarterly meeting with them for their August 3rd meeting at 6 p.m. I'm sure I can speak for the chair that all of you are clearly invited to attend,
What's the date?
like last time. August 3rd at 6 p.m. and obviously it'll be in person because everything has to be back in
Where am I
person
going to
again.
be? August 3rd.
August 3rd, I think it's a Tuesday. Is it a Tuesday?
Yes, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, okay, so I checked in for their July meeting, but they already had such a full agenda that they asked us to come in August. And that, again, that's just a check-in and to let them know what we've been up to and
Where's it?
what we hope to do. Where? Here, in the legislative chambers. Star Estate did end up paying the school district and the town. Although they didn't pay exactly what was due, they were a little bit short. A couple months of interest and penalties. The school district has decided to not pursue it any further, but they did thank us for our efforts and said they didn't think they would have received the check at all if it weren't for the work we had done, so I think that was good. And that is it for me, Chair.
Okay, any questions for our CEO?
Chair, I just have a question.
Okay.
There were two things that have come up since in the last month and a half, and I think I discussed it with Rose, and I think I discussed it with you. The letter from New Paltz regarding transparency, and I'm wondering if we want to in some way either respond to it or make sure that the public at large knows just how transparent we are, and if there are things we can do. I know we've tried before, but improve on transparency or tell people process, which is a transparent process. And the second thing is, in light of what happened with another IDA in the area in terms of some of the board members, felony charges being launched against them, I'm wondering if it's would be appropriate for CFO, myself, perhaps the audit and the governance chair, just to get together and list a number of things that we have in place that Rose executes against to ensure
I
that
think you'd be remiss if you didn't do that.
that there are no problems. And I'm not worried as a CFO, I know what we have in place, but I think we need to make sure that the whole board knows that and the public to the extent that.
To address both your points, and they're valid, good points. I believe, and I don't think I'm wrong, I believe we've offered several times in the last few years to put on programs for municipalities, school boards, whatever public entity out there, to get them a better understanding of the workings and taking them through an entire process here. So that is nothing that's not on the table. We can put together something that we can take it on a traveling roadshow if be, with the help of council and whoever. So that's an easy one. And I wouldn't, not just, I'm not going to quote it because of New Paltz, but it's something that we decided to do a long time ago. That we would do whatever we had to do, because the strength in this board is a public understanding of what it is we do and how we get there. There's still a lot of people out there that think we actually hand money out, and we don't do that, and we have oversight. The second part of it, again, you'd be remiss, and the other chairs would be remiss if they didn't continually be introspective and take a look at how this board operates. The minimum standard here are the state laid down guidelines. Those are the minimums for us. Those aren't the maxes. So we take it very seriously in being in compliance with anything that's down. And actually we hold ourselves to a little bit of a higher standard. We've increased some of the criteria. So I think we're in good shape in that, but I think it's something that whether you feel you should do it a couple of times a year, quarterly, once a year, we're always in the mode of being, looking at ourselves in front of a big mirror.
So, what I'll do, Chair, as a CFO, I'll come up with a summary of the protections we have in place, because nobody's going to wade through all policies and procedures, but I'll.
Well, it's pretty
come up
much
with a
state criteria.
I'll pass it by the audit and the governance committees for their input, and then I'll deliver it to the board. So it'll be a couple of pages of, here are all the things that we have in place to ensure.
We're continually moving, so if we feel the need to tweak things because we have concerns, or maybe it's just something that affects this county with things that are going on, maybe it is something with solar, we'll say. Maybe we have to deal with that in specifics. If something is germane to things that are going on here, we always adjust. We can put things in. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Dr. Dig?
Yeah, just to reiterate that, I think too, it's my first year on the board, and I know the exorbitant amount of time that the audit committee and governance in this board has worked on creating policies that reflect the needs of the county and the role of this board, and trying to be very transparent in all that we do. And I think there's been a great effort on the part of this entire board the last year, and certainly I think it's better for people to know exactly what we've done and how important this work is to all of us.
I also want to tell you, I did reply to New Paltz. Yes, I did reply to New Paltz and told them that all of the information that they were saying should be available to the public. I let them know that it is all on our website. And if you recall, when Senator Skoufis had met with us last year, we actually have more on our website than most of the other IDAs in New York State. And then part of the resolutions that we have today coming out of Governance Committee were to help with transparency and to make sure that there is no conflict of interest. So, I think we've obviously made great strides and we're continuously doing more to protect ourselves.
We're ever moving. Thank you, Chair. And Rick, thank you for shedding some light on that. I hope where I'm coming from that answers or you can get behind it, but we weren't broken. I'll put it to you that way. We weren't broken, but we're trying to be the best model of what we can be. And that again goes back to the diligence and the hard work and the sacrifice of time of a lot of these board members. So again, I can't thank you enough.
Also, I just wanted to make a statement, Rose, what was the total amount of PPE grants that were given out?
I have that total for you. I forgot to write that down. I'll get it for you shortly. But and for the last part of my report, I was gonna ask, Joe has an update for us. There were a lot of laws passed passed ready for the governor's signature at the end of the legislative session this year. So he had a brief update on the things that affected us.
Sure, thank you, Rose. So just quickly, I think the headline that I've been taking from what transpired in the last legislative session was not what did happen, but what didn't happen. There were probably 10, 15 bills out there that increased significantly the regulation on IDAs, including a very large piece of legislation that was supported by the ABO, which enacted a lot of additional regulations and penalties. With respect to the regulations, in my view, many of the regulations were duplicative, things that we're already doing either directly or indirectly under existing state legislation. So, and then there were two other pieces of legislation that didn't get enacted. One was the general rule, and the chair has talked about this earlier today. There's a prohibition on IDAs pirating, moving projects from one part of the state to another. There's exceptions to that pirating prohibition. The first exception is if the project applicant is going to move out of state. The second exception is if the move is necessary for the applicant to increase its competitive position in its industry. Well, the proposed legislation would have eliminated the second exception. So you could only move a project if they were going to move out of state. And my sarcastic response to that is only in New York State would they penalize companies from wanting to improve their competitive position and going through an IDA. That being said, the fourth legislation that didn't get enacted was a piece of legislation that would prohibit elected officials from being appointed to an IDA board. And again, I thought that was interesting because IDAs, as you know, and we see it locally, we get whipsawed. We get criticized for too much communication. We get criticized for not enough communication. Well, many IDAs have elected officials on their boards because they want to increase the level of communication between the IDA and the governing body. Well, here's a piece of legislation that was introduced by the Assembly and the Senate that would prohibit that. With respect to legislation that was adopted, one piece of legislation that was enacted by both the Senate and the Assembly, but to my knowledge hasn't been signed by the governor yet, would prohibit an elected official from being hired by an IDA to act as a paid official or a paid staff member. And candidly, I think that's good legislation. Another piece of legislation that was enacted by both houses would extend the IDA loan and grant program, which this, as Faye's question, to Rose, this board was very active with respect to the loan and grant program under the COVID authorization, and they've extended that program. The third piece of legislation that I wanted to describe to you was a piece of legislation that would require, in a situation where there's a county IDA and multiple local IDAs, a town IDA, a city IDA, a village IDA, it required all of those IDAs to charge the same administrative fees as the county IDA. So what they were trying to prevent was forum shopping.
Pirating?
Pirating indirectly from one IDA to the next within that jurisdiction. And I think that's good legislation. So I think the highlight, the takeaway was what didn't get adopted. I thought the piece piece of legislation that did get adopted, I think made sense. The last piece of information I'll pass on to you, and this was a piece of legislation that I do not believe, and I'm sorry I don't have this answer on my fingertips, wasn't enacted, and that was a piece of legislation introduced by a legislator down from Long Island, who historically has been very anti-IDA, and the legislation that she's been involved in has been legislation that would limit an IDA's powers. That piece of legislation would expand an IDA's powers to include, as an IDA project, the ability of an IDA to issue bonds for a city school district. And the background there is that city school districts under New York law have a very limited constitutional debt limit computation. Central school districts have a very expansive constitutional debt limit computation. So if you have a central school district that's going to issue debt for a school building and say it's $40 million of debt, if that school district is an 80% aid school district, 80% of that $40 million doesn't count against their constitutional debt limit. So it's very, very unusual for a central school district to run into constitutional debt limit problems if they are going to issue debt for a capital project. City school districts have not only a smaller percentage of their taxable property eligible or to be counted with respect to the computation for their constitutional debt limit, but they also don't have that state aid set aside. So if a city school district is going to issue $40 million of debt, all $40 million of that debt counts against their constitutional debt limit. So what this legislation would do would allow the IDA to issue the bonds on behalf of the city school district, and the IDA would enter into a lease agreement with the city school district. That lease agreement wouldn't count as constitutional debt of the city school district and would allow the city school district to do their capital project. Why I have a smile on my face is that under the local finance law, the city school district can exceed its constitutional debt limit if it does two things. One, if it gets 60% of the voters to approve the capital project, and if they go through an approval process of the Office of State Controller and the Board of Regents. We do that with, we represent a number of city school districts, and they have this problem, and we go through that process. It's very elaborate, it's a pain in the neck, it takes time because these two state agencies frankly work very slowly on these problems. But the way the legislature should address this problem is not by expanding the IDA statute, but by amending the New York State Constitution to eliminate that, to make the city school district provisions the same as the central school district provisions. The problem with that situation is that you need to go through, in order to amend the New York State Constitution, you need to have legislation adopted in two concurrent legislative bodies. So you can't do it all in 1 year. You have to do it in two consecutive 2-year terms for the legislature. And that's been very difficult for the legislature. So my takeaway on that piece of legislation is that it's further indication that IDAs are receptive, responsive, local, and quick, which is something that you don't often see, frankly, in state government. And I took it as a backhanded compliment that there was an expansion in that situation, and it was just somewhat ironic that in which the context in which this took place. So that's my quick report on the.
And that was not down, Jeff?
Sorry?
Was that approved or?
It was not, to my knowledge, it was not approved. I'll be back to you on that. I don't think it was approved. But I just found it funny that there was an expansion.
All right, thank you very
I
much.
have the totals that Faye was asking for.
Give them to her then.
And I think audit had asked us to do this anyway. So for the grants between 2020 and 2021 for the IDA and CRC combined, we spent $295,124 on grants. The administration of them was $23,872 on postage. So the grand total spent on the grant program was $318,000 and $318,997. Sorry.
It's good when you can help, right?
So roughly 319,000.
If you're selling the car, it's $319.
Yeah. Well, that's not bad.
It's not bad now.
We helped
This
a
is
lot
very
of
good,
businesses.
honestly, given the size of this IDA, commitments we made, and listen, as long as we can help people, we should, right? Okay, thank you, council. Anything else you'd like to add? No? Dr. D, audit?
Thank you, Chair. The audit committee, we had a meeting, a lengthy meeting on June 22nd. A few things to share from that. But first, if you refer to page 12 in your packet, construction labor monitoring report, Loki Grau, for, and this, the last site visit, as I mentioned earlier, was on May 11th with a 93% compliance, and their overall compliance at this point is 82%.
That goes back how far?
Since the beginning,
Ballpark.
probably the beginning of the year.
This
Yeah,
past
for
year.
the project,
Overall.
the project for the entire
It's
year.
overall year,
Project.
or overall for the project.
Project, yeah.
All right.
Um, Yep, and the other thing to note is that RBW Studio is slated to begin in August with Loki Grill.
Okay. Good for Loki Grill.
Yes. Second item is, that came out of the audit committee is the UHY invoice for, this is the group we're working with, who are doing the audit reporting for us. So as you may remember, we looked at the UHY invoice and engagement letter for services to be performed, and the engagement letter stated that the fee would be $10,000 to do the audit. And that any notification would be given to us that there was a significant increase in their fees. After the completion of the audit, a second invoice was received, which brought the total due for the audit over 7.5% from the $10,000. So they were charging us significantly more for the audit than what was in our agreement letter. And the agency was not notified ahead of time that there would be any increase in time. So as a result of this, I'd like to recommend to the board, the audit committee would like to recommend to the board that one, the invoice not be paid until an agreement is made that future engagement letters ensure that the agency will be notified ahead of time of any potential increases in cost.
That's just, I mean, that's just good
standard,
business.
and that's actually standard practice. Most contracts would say that they'll be notified client if it goes above
I
the
don't think we have
estimate,
any issues
period,
with that.
right? And then the other thing is that we want to recommend that once the agreement is reached and we change the language, the agency will only then pay the rest of the invoice up to the original estimated amount of $10,000.
Got it.
What do we need to do? We don't need a roll call or anything on that.
The voice vote would be fine.
All right, I think, do you have anything else on that? Or do you
No,
wanna
I
get them all at once, or what are we doing here? Individually?
We can just do it all, the changes together. two
Just need a
changes
motion and a
together.
Do you have anything else?
Not related to that, no.
Okay, can I get a motion for concurrence with the recommendation from the audit chair?
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second that.
I have a second. Anyone on the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried, thank you.
The next item is, recommendation for changes to the Lucky Grill contract. So with this, again, the audit committee would like to recommend to the board that we change the contract with Lucky Grill to revise the construction labor reporting to include monthly on-site visits instead of bi-monthly on-site visits for all new projects. One of the things that we learned talking with Loki Grill is that other county IDAs in the area actually do monthly reporting versus bi-monthly. The town of Montgomery, Orange County, and Genesee County are just some examples of IDAs that use monthly reporting for their projects. And secondly, we would like to include language to be drafted by council in the agency agreement that binds all the subcontractors to the general contractors, holding them accountable for their labor. And to three, put a one-year expiration on the contract. In conjunction with the changes to the contract, the audit committee will recommend to governance committee that expiration dates are added to all contracts.
I'm gonna ask for a motion in a second, then on the question, if there are any conversation, we'll do that. So I have a motion for concurrence with the recommendation on the Loki Grill matter.
I'll make a motion.
It's Savona, do I have a second?
Second.
Rick Jones behind the mask. Anything on the question? Okay, now I just to be specific, some of this is housekeeping, right? With and it has to go back to the ABO regarding termination dates of agreements and everything else. It doesn't take out of our hands the 30-day out. Okay, so we still have that level of protection. I agree with you wholeheartedly on doing it monthly because, it's kind of like knowing when you're coming kind of deal. And actually, when you're making them responsible for second and third tier subs, that's as important as well. That's no different than what New York State does as far as legislation on prevailing wage. Although IBA incentives aren't currently, prevailing wage, we'll see what happens next year. I think it's a good, safe manner to proceed. So, anything else on this? So I have a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
All right, and the next thing is project post-closing affidavit update. So the audit committee, we talked about this. Reminder emails were sent to the project that had not completed their post-closing affidavit with a firm completion date of June 30th. That was the deadline that they were given. The committee discussed having to make some changes to the post-closing affidavit. So we discussed and thought it would be a good idea to require a final release, final waiver of claims and liens, and release of rights form for all contractors to be returned with the completed post-closing affidavit, and to set a firm submission date of 60 days to the ID from the date of completion of construction. And to add a spot for the project CPAs to directly sign the affidavit and had it notarized.
Council? Position on that?
Yeah, it certainly tightens up the document, Chair, and I don't have any issues with it.
All right, again, I'll ask for a motion for concurrence with the recommendation.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Faye. Do I have a second?
Second?
Thank you, Rick. Anyone on the question? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, Chair. Anything else under your report?
I do, one last thing, we were busy. And that's related to a cost-benefit analysis policy, and this was a discussion that led us to, moving this on to recommend moving this on to, governance committee. But we discussed to move the discussion on creating some kind of a policy, for when to engage a third-party cost-benefit analysis report, or some kind of financial report about whatever established criteria is decided upon on being done for potential projects asking for a certain dollar amount of inducements or with a certain level of complexity, such as remote employees and then to create an RFP that would go out.
So anything that's not typical, you would create levels?
Correct. So the idea is there's a lot of complexity in a lot of these projects, and it may be wise for us to seek an outside cost benefit.
It gives us another layer of protection, and of course, it lets the public know that no one's sliding one by on us. So
We'll send that to governance to.
I would work hand in hand with governance regarding that. Thank you for your report.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we will move on to finance.
Nothing to report at this time, Chair.
Nothing under finance. Chair, governance.
So, as Diane said, we met on June 22nd at 11 a.m. for governance, and both committees were pretty busy. It was a long meeting, right? 3-4 hours, right? That was a good one. So I'll start with the update to the mentoring program. The mentoring program, Chair, we reviewed it, we tweaked it. We know it's going to be a program or a checklist that's going to be constantly being updated and revised and added to. So it's a work in progress. But I, as governance chair, after everybody had a chance to review it and go through it, I say that we accept what we have currently right now. We initiate it and update it to what we put it on our website for future applicants to use and to utilize it even for current applicants that maybe are in the dark a little bit or have a little gray on on how this is operating, and this is, falls back on the chair's comment not too long ago. There's a belief out there that we actually give away money, and, that's not the case. I think this is going to help out a lot, streamline the application process, whether or not it's good for an applicant, whether, another avenue may be where they need to be. But that's my recommendation at a governance on
So
that.
you're not looking for any changes?
No, not looking for any
Well, that's
changes.
good. And the beauty of the program is that you create a floor and there's a ceiling and you tweak it as necessary.
Correct.
So good stuff, thank you for that. All right, you've got a bunch of resolutions, right? These are all gonna be roll call?
Yeah,
Thank you.
huh? What, okay, so, the first one would be, the enforcement action against, Ulster, NH Realty.
Can I hold you there?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna go out of
Go ahead.
typical, the way we do business, and comments on agenda items, and they usually come afterwards, but,
Mhm.
and I'm sorry, your name is?
Katie Perez.
Katie Perez, has made some communications to us, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't give her an opportunity to speak. And, we were in receipt of a letter yesterday, with Saul's name on the bottom of it. Were you commissioned to send that, or did he send it?
Yes, he sent it to me and I sent it over.
Okay. So it was under his direction that letter came.
Saul and I talked like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, we don't talk. We've been trying to talk for 3 months. We don't talk. I don't know what it is. I never did anything wrong to him. But Katie, please.
I could talk openly, and I wanted to thank you for letting me come and talk on behalf of Infinite Care. So just a little bit about myself. I have been, actually as of today, an employee of Pembroke for 29 years. I've been the acting administrator there for over 21 years. And when we sold to Infinite Care, it was because of the type of people that Saul and his company were. We had other people that we could have sold to, and we really looked at it hard and decided to go with Saul and his company. That being said, when we decided to take over Golden Hill, when Saul decided to take over Golden Hill, he asked me to become the regional director of operations. After being the administrator at Pembroke for those 20 plus years, it was a tough decision, but I did it because Golden Hill and Pembroke have always gone back and forth. Golden Hill has been struggling a little bit, and I felt that for me it was important that I was able to bring some of the tricks and tools that we have over at Pembroke to Golden Hill to make it just as successful as Pembroke. So that has been my job to do that. I apologize that Sol did not come to the last meeting or the meeting before there. And again, there's nothing I can say about that except I would love to move on and move forward and tell you a little bit about what we've done on the ground in the homes day in and day out since we've taken over Golden Hill. And I can tell you a little bit about what we've done. So at this point, we have 310 employees. We, as of this morning, have hired 91 employees since we've taken over. That being said, obviously through attrition, people leave. COVID hit us pretty hard over there. We lost some employees. Some employees did not want to go back to healthcare. We lost some employees due to CHRC, which is a background check where they won't let us hire somebody for valid reasons. Right now, we all know that there's a staffing crisis going on. We brought our dietary department in-house. When we got to Golden Hill, it was being outsourced by another company. We brought it in-house in order to get more employees working for us as opposed to working for another company. We brought our laundry in-house for the same reasons. We have created positions. We created a unit assistant program, which is to help the CNAs on the floor. So they're not certified, but they're unit assistants. We put them through a feeding course. They're able to work on the floor, help feeding, help water pitchers, transport residents back and forth wherever they're going, and just be hands and eyes for the residents. We did hire a BOCES instructor, an old BOCES instructor, to bring back some of the staff education that's needed in the facility. We worked with the Department of Health to get in the CNA class to be done in-house. That had expired when we got there, so we were given that approval to do that. So we now have the CNA class that we're working on getting started there. Right now, we do have that at Pembroke, and we're working on bringing some Golden Hill students over to Pembroke, and then back to Golden Hill once they do pass their class.
You would agree that in any process, communication is the key, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely,
You would agree with that?
absolutely.
So when there was entertaining ideas of laying off staff, you would agree that given that you have a pilot program with the Ulster County IDA, communication would be of the utmost importance, right?
Absolutely.
So this is not you, you just
So
happen
I-
to,
no.
let me finish what I'm saying. You happen to be in the room. So if you're entertaining full-scale layoffs, I mean, don't you think that it would behoove Golden Hill to call and say, look, we're gonna have a change here. And the reason, I know you wanna say something, let me finish. It would behoove them to say, I know we're gonna have a change here, we wanna let you know what's going on. You're not here because of lack of quality care. You're here because the owners of the entity just disregarded the entire process. That's why you're here. And you know what? If they had more people that were representative like you that can speak to the positives, but unless you're speaking to someone, we don't know. And again, I'm not saying shading a bad light on you, but that would be something because this was a hot button issue and the care at these nursing homes. So while I embrace where you're coming from and the steps that you made, I mean, hey, look, I grew up in a household where, you know, you fed people based on what was in the refrigerator, kind of thing. And you guys made changes, the direction you're going in, you moved people into other things, there's cost-cutting measures, so you could retain some jobs. But how many people were laid off?
That's what I wanna know, we didn't do any layoffs.
Well, I was being told
There's
here
not
that,
one layoff that was done since we've taken over.
okay, well,
So I have a quick question, you just said
How many
currently
people
there's
are laid off?
310 there, and you just added 90, so there's 400 people again?
There's 310 now.
310 now
With
and
those
then 90.
Employees,
With the
not
90, we lost a lot of people through COVID.
That's what I was asking.
A lot of people didn't come back after COVID, so 20 resigned, they decided they didn't wanna be in healthcare anymore after COVID. And again, we can hire 91 today, and maybe in 4 weeks, maybe we'll have 50 of those people. And again, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but what we work on is building from within, and that's how we always did it at Pembroke. We build from within. We have programs that are first-time home buyers programs that we do. We offer our employees $5,000 to buy their first home. It's paid back $1,000 per year, and that gets the people to stay in and the longevity to happen.
I mean, our actions are based on not what you're entertaining to keep
Right.
people in the fold. The reason you're here today is the fact that, and again, please explain to me the numbers I was given as far as layoffs. Were there wholesale
And I
layoffs?
feel it's unfair that he sent you today.
I'm trying to get an
And you know
answer.
what, and I gotta tell you, I asked him to come, because I do this day in and day out.
Yeah.
So, and he said he'd come, I'm okay.
I don't need to look at it, I need you to.
No, and I feel bad, he should be, because it's not about the service, the care, that's not with
Right.
you per se. But it was his actions that
Rose has the numbers, please, Rose.
Yep. So the issue was with the annual reporting,
Yeah,
we had said that not a single nursing staff person could lose their job, or they would need to be replaced immediately.
and
It was 330 FTEs was the agreement, and it went down to an average of 205.8 for that last quarter of 2020 while Infinite Care had taken over. When I spoke with Saul in December at our Zoom visit, he had never mentioned that there was any kind of issue with the number of employees or with people leaving or anything bad going on.
so let me just go back to the 330. When we got to Golden Hill, we cleaned up a lot of stuff. So maybe there were 330 people, but there was probably 32 of them when I looked yesterday that were per diem that had not worked in a really long time.
It's not based on the number of people employed, it's based on the number of hours worked.
Right.
So that FTE means that there were 330 people working, if you do it based on a 35-hour work week. So this isn't about per diem or not per diem, this is about literally the people working in the building.
So, and again, we did not lay off one single person. Did people choose to leave? Yes. Did our census go down to 195 and it was hard to get people to work? Yeah, it did. Our census was in the 230s, I believe. Don't quote me.
We have those figures as well, and it did decrease.
Of course
The
it
number
did.
of people decreased, but not in the same amount.
And
The
care
number
didn't
of
suffer at
people
all.
was
If
left.
we were the type of company that was laying people off, why would we create a $1,500 referral bonus? In In other words, so we pay each employee, if I refer you to Pembroke and you stay there, you get $1,500.
Well, listen, it's an incentive to keep people there. No, again,
It's
no
incentive
one,
to bring them in.
no one is denying the fact that you're trying to keep a business model going during tremendously bad times. Herein lies the problem. There's a responsibility on behalf of that nursing home and the owners to report these things back to us. If 50 people left, you need to pick up the phone and say, this is the reason 50 people left. These people aren't poor, they're in this business. And you can't get around the fact that the responsibility falls on the owners of that nursing home.
And I'm not saying yes, no. What I'm telling you is I'm sitting here as regional director doing the day in and day out work of that nursing home and working with Saul. I have never called Saul up one time where I said I need something and I didn't get it.
But if the problem is, for 3 months, we've been trying to get Saul, telling him we have a problem, and we haven't gotten a response, right? And he entered into an agreement with the IDA on this project, knowing full well what's really important in terms of getting inducements and et cetera. It couldn't have been any clearer. And the fact that there was changes going on in the business, we get that. What we don't get is radio silence. And that you have to be here, unfortunately, to be the ones to have the conversation with us. And that's really the unfortunate part.
He was supposed to, 3 meetings he was supposed to.
3 months, 3
Again,
months.
Again, I can't speak about what happened then. I'm telling you, I work with him day in and day out. And
Well, our point of contact is Saul, and what I'm hearing from you is that we're never gonna, Saul was the one who put it to us. Here's what we wanna do, here's what we promised to do, we made all of our agreement with Saul. Saul apparently doesn't realize he now has another partner, it's called the IDA, and he can't do glue when it comes to staffing or any of the financial arrangements he made with us, unless he includes us in it. And there's nothing, by his absence today, there's nothing that would cause me to hope or believe that we're gonna have any other kind of experience going forward.
I know.
You should have
So,
entered it.
it's not gonna work.
When we spoke on the phone, Katie, I know that you had said that you were concerned about the perception of what the staff is doing. I don't think I can be sure, nobody on this board thinks that the staff is doing a poor job. This isn't reflective of the people that are still working there. This is a larger issue.
I appreciate that. And also, you know, when the article came out about the 3 stars that went from 4 to 3, it completely, you know, it did go to 3. We got a deficiency. We fought that deficiency. We won. It went back up to 4. So again, and I know what you're saying. I know you're saying he is the person who made that deal. I have spoken to him. I have told him that I would like to be the representative to be talking to.
So you wanna be the responsible person.
I'm sorry?
You wanna be the responsible,
I
Except you didn't
communication.
sign any of the contracts with us, so you're a non-entity.
And it's a-
So let's,
I mean, Sal's already.
Well, and
let's clear a hurdle in the room.
And again, I can ask him to come next time. I can have.
No,
him
I don't
come
wanna
next
see
time.
Let's clear a hurdle in the room. Okay, Joe, did you initiate the letter as of the last meeting over to Golden Hill saying you did? Okay, listen, I can appreciate you being here today, and once again, I reiterate what the chair says, nobody is saying that the quality of care is not being addressed, okay? We think that you're doing a great job. Our problem is on numerous times, we've sent correspondence over to Saul saying he had to be here. I don't know what happened with that, but the response here today is because you were being put back on the tax rolls. That was the last straw for us and the final. We don't come to that conclusion very easily, but this is something where we had to take a stand on this. It was just going unrecognized, and once again, as Rick put it, you know, we're also a partner with Golden Hill up there with NHL Realty, and you know, it's being addressed. I think you just made a statement here saying there's been no layoffs whatsoever. If there's no layoffs, how are we not receiving the proper numbers on work?
And I guess I'm curious, and I'd love to talk even at another time about what layoffs we're talking about.
Right.
Did people leave?
Well, it's FTEs.
Did we have to let some people go if something happened? Yes,
Well,
that's
again, if the amount of patients, now this is what I was told, I don't know how true that is. The amount of patients you had went down. You came to this board and said, there was 500 patients in here a month ago, But since the change in COVID protocols and everything, we're down to 300. Well, of course, if there's something going on, but again, it requires communication. And not once since you've been here have I heard, well, there was changes and the fact that we lost 30% of our patient base.
Well, I did say census went down to 195.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And again, I hear what you're
You
saying.
say that when the reporter's in here? What's wrong with you?
I hear what you're saying, and again, the decision is made, it's made. I'm here to talk about the care that's in the facility because that's what's important to me.
Not in question.
I understand that.
That's even something that we have to get involved in, that's between you and the state health department and other people that know what you should be providing in terms of service. Our arrangement is a financial arrangement with Sol, that's who made the arrangement.
We've got involved in this as an IDA to maintain that current number of employees. Also, so we can provide the proper care. And that's why we're involved in this. And, right now, the numbers I have in front of me and the reports I have, it's not being, the
That's what
FTEs
you
are not
all
being
reported
maintained.
to us.
And that was a big concern. That letter went out. I know we personally asked him also to attend committee meetings, subcommittee meetings.
That horse
And
is dead.
I can say, we can talk about staffing numbers, we can look at this we can look everywhere, and staffing numbers are down. We've created positions to make it work when we don't have a lot of CNAs, we don't have a lot of LPNs. So we've created other positions, we've brought consultants in, so it's maybe for the it sounds like the staff has gone down, but we have done a tremendous amount of work to keep the numbers up.
To be commended for that. But again, the
I
house is
hear you.
burned down behind you. No one knows any of this until this point.
Trust me, I hear you.
And we don't enter in. This was not a very popular project. There was a lot of public outcry regarding nursing homes. There was no legislation in place. This board started at square one to create something that would let the public know that there was a watchful eye on it. So it looks as though we didn't do our job at this point. But what happened is that you can't have a partnership if only one person's working towards the same goal. And you could say that you created an atmosphere where people can walk on water. I think that's great. But at the end of the day, there's been a total lack of compliance, reporting, respect for the process. That's the only reason that we may take the action we're going to take. It doesn't reflect back on you professionally. As far as I'm concerned, if you were the person along the process representing them and empowered to make decisions and interact with the CEO, I think we'd have to take a look at things differently, but that unfortunately is not what happened. So,
I think we should just move
Can I
forward.
just ask,
Joe?
There's been a number of numbers thrown around. What's the explanation of going from 330 to just over 200? You said there's been no layoffs. What's the explanation?
So again, I don't have the,
We're talking FTEs
I don't know
now.
where you got the number
We need
200.
to talk, well,
From you.
the 330,
You.
Okay,
No, they reported that.
Okay.
That's what you reported.
so
Sure, I
in the
think we
middle,
should
and
move
again, if you got the report in the end of December, beginning of January, yeah, we had over 100 people out with COVID, people left.
It's an average for that one quarter. So they knew when they signed this at the end of August, and this was in the middle of the pandemic. They knew what they were signing in the middle of the pandemic. They knew what they were up against. And the average, it wasn't that there were 205 people working on December 31st. It's that through that entire period, the number of FTEs was 205.
So again, if you look at COVID and the amount of people that left the position, and then you look at the amount of people we hired, it goes back and forth. And census went down to 195, so the census did drop quite a bit throughout COVID, which obviously we would have less employees throughout that.
And we have those figures here for you guys.
So-
yeah.
The day-to-day life in a nursing home, staffing has always been an issue, not just now. So to say that we're gonna stay at the exact,
Right, but
No.
that's what they signed. They knew that.
But they have a percentage that they can go down to,
With
and
this,
they still didn't report it.
so let me ask you, people who own, again, people who own businesses that are able to shut their doors because the staffing is hard, we can't do that. We have to come up with different ways to make sure that those residents are being met.
But unfortunately, unfortunately, however way you wanna look at it, the people who are closing their businesses didn't have a pilot program or an incentive program
Correct.
with this group.
Correct, but this group has to kind of understand that we're making.
Well,
our
how do we
We
understand-
partnered in with
Okay.
Solid,
All
we
right.
understand we were maintaining.
We're
this,
just
And
but-
getting
the
emotional.
right, and the communication wasn't there, and there's nothing I can say about the communication. I'm here now, I explained exactly what's been going on.
Certainly appreciate you coming in and shedding a little bit more light. Governance Chair, you wanna continue?
Yeah, so do you want me to do these on a base by base and then have Joe overview?
Well, yeah,
On
I
the
mean, we gotta
resolutions.
do them one at a time.
Do we wanna go into, do you wanna have a discussion with council to review any of the comments?
I do, can we go into an executive session to discuss that?
Maybe, and have the advice of council on
Yes.
what was described here? If that's the sense of the board.
Yes.
I think.
I'd like to
that's a
make a
smart
motion to go into executive
I'll
session.
second.
idea.
Thank you.
Pretty good job there.
It's been a long time in healthcare.